Hi, Lyndsey.
Hi.
Thank you for agreeing to come on University Challenged. So for the listeners today and for the listeners to come, can you please tell us your name and what it is that you do for a job today?
Sure. So hi everyone, I'm Lyndsey Charlton and I am Chief Operating Officer for Daisy. Daisy are a IT and telecommunications company, so we're a managed service provider who also specialise in operational resilience, which is risk.
Great. So that's today. A big job, a big board director, yes?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I'm on the board of directors.
Yeah. So before we get to how you got there, what are your memories of secondary school?
I absolutely loved secondary school, partially because of the social side of it, because I'm quite a social person, but also I did love school and I loved the lessons. I loved learning. I wasn't so keen on homework because I had quite an active social life, not so much just going out with friends, but I did a lot of activities. I did swimming, I did horse riding, I did dancing. So I had quite a hectic life in general, but fun. But yeah, I absolutely loved school. I was a prefect at school as well.
Wow.
So got to kind of monitor the door, get me sandwich before everyone else.
Perks of the job.
Yeah, but I did really enjoy school. Got on quite well with teachers, that kind of stuff, and I got on with a lot of different types of people at school. There's a lot of stereotypes of, the groups of people that kind of hang together, and I probably got on with the majority of people, and never really stuck to an individual group in that sense. Just a people person in general.
And an all-rounder, it would sound.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And whereabouts in the country did you go to school?
In County Durham, so from the northeast of England. Still live here, have always lived here, travelled lots with jobs in different places, but always stayed in County Durham because it's my home and I have family and friends here, and I love the community spirit that we have in the northeast.
Yeah. And was it was your school a state school, a grammar school, private school? What type of
No,
school?
It was just a state school. Yeah.
And what
I think is what it was called at the time in the 90s.
Yeah. And what exams did you sit? UGCSE?
GCSE, yes. Yeah. So I sat GCSEs where you get to choose what subjects you do, which was interesting because I had no idea what I wanted to do, and the subjects that I chose were probably ones that my parents chose, or my mum anyway. Do that because this will be good for a job, and actually it wasn't. And it wasn't really. I did keyboarding, for example, and that's not like musical keyboarding, it's learning how to type.
Yeah.
Because my mum thought a good job is, an office job, so you need to know how to type properly.
Yeah.
I wish I'd done PE because I wish I'd just done the subjects that I enjoyed. But yeah, so kind of your typical standard ones, your science subjects, French. I think I did French, history, etc.
And that's quite interesting. Just you mentioning your parents there, for so many questions. So a conversation I ended up in with a big group of people on Facebook was I asked people how involved were your parents in your secondary education, and some were like they had no involvement at all and they weren't interested, and some were they invested loads of money but didn't provide the home environment. So it sounds like, did your parents sort of give you some guidance or show preference to what you studied?
My mum did, definitely, and I think a big part of her guidance was based on her experience. So my mum's quite academic, she's very bright and intelligent, and her parents had a family business, and her expectation was she would finish, and she went to grammar school. She would finish school and go and work in the family business, and I think she would have liked to have gone on and done further education, but it wasn't necessarily an option for her. So I think she felt like she missed out, so she was encouraging me to kind of go on to that and think about, well, this type of job is a good job. But in the 90s, the careers advice, and to be fair, I think it is a lot better. There's a lot to improve on, a lot still, but yeah, it was not great. The advice you get, it's you know, when you're making decisions about what subjects do you take,
Yeah.
really hard. I teach dancing to children, and I always say to the girls who are, you know, choosing their subjects, I always just say to them, pick a subject that you're interested in, because if you're interested in something, you'll do well in it.
Yeah.
Pick something. Don't think you're trying to shape your career at that age of like, what, 13, 14, you know what you're going to do. You're not.
Yeah. No. And what happened after GCSEs? Did you go to sixth form?
Well, I was supposed to go to sixth form. I was supposed to go to Durham sixth form. Again, probably influenced from my parents in that you need to get further education, etc., and you know, to get a good job. And so I did sign up to Durham sixth form, and then really last minute I got my GCSE results, and I think I would say I was just average, and I did average, and I think a big part of that was I really didn't like exams.
Yeah.
So exams wouldn't, and they still aren't, you know, even when I did my dancing exams, throughout all of the classes that I took, the teacher expected me to come out the highest on the exams, and I didn't. And I just said, I just don't think I like exams, which is also ironic, because you might then think I don't do well under pressure. I actually excel under pressure. So I think it's more of a, maybe it's the pressure of, you need to do exam, you know. I think there's probably, get a psychologist on the case and they'll probably unwind what that means. But yeah, so I kind of did a U-turn. So the parents thought, you know, both my parents thought I was going to do college, kind of sixth form, and I dropped out last minute because I found out about a couple of the girls who were in my year at school said, oh, we're going to do this YTS scheme. And it's in business administration. And which all I knew at the time, I had no idea what that meant. It was just, it's an office job, and I'd been told an office job was a good job to get, which I now don't necessarily agree with. I think there's lots of other good jobs out there. So that I kind of went down that path, and it was, what interested us about the YTS scheme is you got moved around somewhere different every 3 months, because business administration is quite vast, depends on what organisation you work for. So I did a U-turn. I mean, I don't think my mum was very happy. Quite disappointed. I probably got it a little bit wrong, but I still stood by. I don't want to go to college. I don't know what I want to do. Why I don't like exams. Why do I want to go and do more?
And what did both of your parents, what did they do as their careers?
So my dad was a motor mechanic by trade. Also I think this is where I get my stubbornness from. So I always remember my dad telling us a story about, he finished school, he didn't go to grammar school, and he finished school, and he kind of, obviously he was born in 1950, so it was a long time ago. And when he finished school, he said, in some careers advice meeting, they were like, you know, do you want to go and do this or do that? And he's like, I want to be a motor mechanic. He knew, I want to be a motor mechanic. Had little jobs, you know, working in I think it was for a butcher and all sorts, just little jobs when he was younger. He was like, I want to be a motor mechanic, and I think he got given a job somewhere in some industry, and he got this job, and they were like, do you not want to be here? And he went, no, I want to be a motor mechanic. And in the end, he got a motor mechanic apprenticeship. So my dad by trade is a motor mechanic. And then probably I don't know whether it was like in like the late 70s, he turned, he used to fix lorries. So part of his trade was fixing lorries, and then ended up being a cell phone lorry driver. So had his own as a lorry driver. So so trucker dad. And then my mum really had multiple jobs. So I think I remember when at stories when I was a baby, she would work in the family business, which was a petrol station and a petrol station with a garage and a bus company. So my grandparents owned them, and my dad used to work in the garage for free just so we could go out with my mum.
Love it.
And then so when we went, like, I always remember my mum telling us stories about I was a baby and she had me on the counter in the kiosk, and it was when people used to fill your petrol up for you. So she'd go and fill the petrol up. My auntie worked in the family business as well. She was a bus driver. Mum was also a motorbike instructor as well. So you know, lots of no jobs, just various different, with it being a family business, everyone did a little bit of everything. And then later on, she didn't really work during the week, so she brought me and my sister up, and we used to babysit my dad's cousin's son, who we always said was our brother from another mother, Philip.
Yeah.
So she kind of spent our time bringing us up, but then worked on a weekend as well. So because my dad came home on a weekend because he'd be away in the lorry.
Yeah.
And then on a weekend, my mum would work in a factory. So she worked at Fisher-Price, the toy factory.
Wow. Oh, wow.
As a child, because we used to get brilliant toys.
Yeah, like that telephone, the little Fisher-Price telephone with a face on it.
Little cassette player.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
good memories of my mum working there. And
Yeah.
actually, the auntie ended up working there later because they sold the family business.
Yeah.
And they ended up. So really, my mum spent a lot of her life really working in, after the family business, working in factories. So she worked, I think she did like injection molding. She used to be a machine setter.
Wow.
My auntie worked in the factories as well, and a lot of my cousins. So in the area that we lived in, manufacturing was quite a big employer post the closure of the mining.
Yeah. Wow. And just a kind of novel point, I guess, for people that watch this on YouTube, they see you're doing some active sitting.
Yes.
Which is a bit like driving, as you've driven a lorry, a bus, a coach,
a bin wagon, an 18-wheeler lorry, a steamroller.
What? Wow. Wow. And
all
these,
in one day.
okay. and many of these vehicles, but not all, have got bouncy seats, and you are sat on a Swiss ball.
I am sat on a Swiss ball, which is would be core when you sat down at a desk a lot of your time.
So you've got on your youth training scheme apprenticeship, and where does that take you?
So my first 3 months I worked at a local council, at Sedgefield Borough Council, in the admin department, and in the housing department, which the first couple of weeks was like, yeah, this is really interesting. And then I got to a point and I was like, oh, I do the same thing every week. I'm not sure if I like this. Highlight of the job was giving old people bus passes. So yeah, we used to laminate them, take their photos, and get regular visitors who lost their pass, who just like to come in for a chat. That was probably the highlight of that job. So my second placement was on an IT help desk at Black & Decker in Spennymoor, and I moved, and I spent 3 months there. And then when it was time to move on, they asked to keep us. And what came about there was, I'd be logging the calls from the office or the shop floor lines if they had faults on any of their IT equipment, and I would log it in a system, and the engineers would then go out. And I had a female team leader, she was the kind of network engineer, and then 2 guys who were what I call your jack of all trade IT, who've got computer science degrees and just know all about computers. So when I wasn't taking calls and it wasn't busy, I would be saying, what are you doing? How does that work? And they would say, come on, we'll show you in the build room. And the 2 guys spent quite a lot of time teaching us, this is a computer, this is how it works, this is the physical element. And I think that they were really good at sharing that information, and I was really interested in it. And then I started doing little bits of jobs, so they didn't need to do them jobs themselves, they passed them on to me. And really, that I got extended probably a couple of times on my YTS scheme before they then approached us and asked us to move on to a modern apprenticeship, which is the first. You had traditional apprenticeships, which were like your engineering type apprenticeships, and modern apprenticeships were brand new, so they were in your HR department, IT, finance, etc. So it was, I think it was one of the first, because the YTS scheme really was probably what an apprenticeship was before modern apprenticeships came along. And I moved on to the modern apprenticeship program from the business admin YTS scheme, and I actually did both of them in parallel, because the instructors who had done the YTS business admin said, well, actually, you've kind of done most of the things you need to do for this. If you're happy to do them both at the same time, you can do them both. And because I'd done so much hands-on experience working in that kind of in the factory with the guys who delegating us tasks and jobs, I actually went straight to an NVQ level 3 instead of having to start with IT, having to start at the very beginning.
Great. So that's your first kind of if I've got this right, it's your first professional qualification. Yeah. Okay. So when I was looking at your LinkedIn profile and your career history, I just see engineer, 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 engineer. How did that part happen for you?
So when I did my IT apprenticeship, I was kind of what you would call now as an infrastructure engineer apprentice.
Yeah.
A little bit of everything. So I finished my apprenticeship, and because the modern apprenticeship scheme was brand new, the way that it worked is you had an apprentice, and then you kind of cycled them out and brought new people in, but they hadn't really worked out. For example, in Black and Decker, they hadn't really worked out, well, what do we do with the apprentice that we've just spent 2-year training and we really want to keep? And they couldn't. They just didn't have a mechanism for it. So it's a shame, because that you're losing your talent then. Now our apprentice schemes in our company, and the aim is you bring people in, you train and develop them, and they will fill the roles. You spent all that time, you don't want to lose those people. And I always remember I did get a lovely reference from the guy who ran the IT department, but there was no role, so there was nowhere to put us, so I moved on. And then kind of did that kind of IT infrastructure IT role, worked in a council for about 6 months, and then back into manufacturing. I worked for Grundfos Pumps in Sunderland, and then I got headhunted for a job at the time Orange, which was the mobile phone company, and it was in 1990, I think 7 or 8, and it was right when the telecom boom was happening, so it was a really exciting time. And I'd gone for this job, and I had no idea. I just thought it was what I did because they had my CV, and this is the thing sometimes with the recruitment firms. So when I gave a recruitment firm my CV when I'd left my apprenticeship, they still had it on record. And so I go for this interview, and they ask us a boatload of questions about networking, and I was a jack of all trades. I'm answering all these questions, and I'm answering them just really honestly. It was probably the funniest one was, Lyndsey, do you know what ATM stands for? And I was like cash machine. And now that's synchronous transfer mode, but at the time it was a cash machine. It was very American. And then when we went through the questions, they said, "What job do you think you've applied for?" And I said, "Well, I'm an infrastructure IT engineer. I do a little bit of everything." "Oh, okay, so tell us what you've done in networking." So kind of honed in. "Oh, this is what I've done in networking." And they were like, "Draw us a network." So I drew a network, and I'd only ever worked on ring networking and Ethernet network. And I was like, and they were like, "Oh, can you draw an Ethernet network?" No, never worked on an Ethernet network.
Wow, I've just had such a flashback. I used to draw network diagrams. One company I worked for, token ring.
Network diagrams. It was a little art. It was art, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Great.
Wow. Wow. Oh, wow. Have something in common. So they did offer you a job then?
They did offer me a job, which I came away thinking, wow. It was a 4-hour interview as well, because they do a lot of psychometric testing and things like that. And I came away thinking, never got that job. Obviously, I've gone thinking one thing, they've thought another. And they also, I always remember as well when they were going through my CV, and I had my hobbies, which was horse riding, kickboxing, dancing, skiing, and swimming. And they were like, "Really?" And I was like, yeah. I think they thought I was just making me, people putting too many things on their hobbies. So no, I actually do all of those things.
But this is it. Yeah. I just got visions of them asking you to well, show us, demonstrate how you do ski.
In my mind, I was thinking, like, first of all, a female engineer, which was quite rare. You had a lot of females, I would say, in developers, but not necessarily in kind of the infrastructure engineering. And so they're probably thinking, a female engineer who does kickboxing, horse riding, dancing, swimming.
Yeah.
Really?
Wow.
So anyway, I got home, and I hadn't even gotten home, and I didn't have a mobile phone then, and they had a phone call to say, "Yeah, you've got the job. We are going to bring you in at a lower level than what the job was advertised for, but we think that you'll be brilliant, and we'll train you." So that's how so I did. Then I went, I spent a lot of time specialising in networking. Spent about 6 years at Orange as a data network engineer. Often got to touch some of the mobile networks when they needed a bit of help. And then I kind of they centralised their IT department down in Bristol. I didn't want to relocate. I'd done quite a lot of secondment, so I travelled there. I spent 3 or 6 months there, but didn't want to leave me home, so decided not to relocate and went through redundancy, which was my first experience of a redundancy process, which was very scary. Probably what I've learned from it is there's always other opportunity out the other side of it. So and I think at the time I would have been in me about 22, 23, so still quite young really. Then I got a job working for a company called Netstar, quite a small company, so there were about 135 staff across the north and south, and so I went for an interview there for a network analyst role and got the job there, which was also really interesting because I'd only ever worked in quite big organisations, so your Black and Decker, Grundfos, and Orange, big enterprise. And I always remember them saying, "Oh, we'll take you into the data centre," and we went into this room, and I was like, "Is this not the comms room?" And like, "This is the data centre," and I was like, "Oh right," because I'd gone from big, huge football pitch data centres to the this is a data centre.
Wow.
But that then gave us probably the ability to learn so much more because it was a smaller organisation. You got involved, at Orange I was just a network engineer because they had another team that did security, another team that did all, lots of different things. So because I ended up working for what was a managed service provider who specialised in kind of host and finance systems as well. So while I come from an infrastructure background, it was, if I've had to explain that company again in today's language, you would say they were probably delivering, software as a service type solutions with being like that, and virtualization before virtualization existed, and then I would have to secure it and do all the networking around it. So as well as networking, I moved into security. Again, another interview, I thought I've never got that job because I do the interview and they ask us all these questions about security. And I'm like, network engineer, but they're like, you understand routing, switching, and they're like, what about firewalls? I don't do firewalls. We had a separate team, and kind of came away from the interview thinking, I don't have what they need. They need someone who can do network and security. And they were like, well, if you know routing, you'll learn firewall, and then we'll train you. We really want you to take the job. So so I got the job there, and that's when I probably spent, I am technically still, that company was acquired by another company, 2E2, who went into administration and was acquired by Daisy, who I work for now. So I started working in 2003 at Netstar, and I'm kind of through lots of acquisitions still in that company, but in many different roles.
And what's interesting to me is that you've gone through these interview processes and they've listened to the skills that you have and thought, oh, that's okay, you've got that knowledge, we can add this layer. Was there any point where they said to you, have you got a degree education? Did you ever feel that was important, or they were looking for that?
No, I think some job adverts have done. Probably I've not applied for a job when I was younger. I've probably not applied for a job because I thought, well, I don't have a degree. But then I think as time went on, people changed, and a lot of the adverts became equivalent experience. And I did, pretty much left school at 16, went straight bang into work, and not long then straight bang into IT, and spent a lot of time working in IT. And I was quite young in comparison to most people, because most people had gone to maybe university or done NC or something like that. So I would say I was quite a lot younger than a lot of people who I was working with.
And how have you gone from that position of engineer, individual contributor to the place where you are today?
Well, so I think that I just assume roles. I've never kind of set out and thought, this is what I want to do, and this is where I'm going to, how I'm going to get there. I kind of just had the ethos of, do a good job, enjoy what you do. If you're interested in something, shout about it. If you've got an opinion on something, speak up about it. I would say in the early part of my career, I probably wouldn't have done that as much as what I do now. I think it comes with age and confidence.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I got to a certain point, and I think there was a team leader role advertised, and I was pretty organised. So, you know, I worked in a team of other engineers, and we worked for, at the time, being the director, and there was a number of us who worked there in a team leader role. I think it was when we did an acquisition, a team leader role became available. So I applied for a team leader role. So it was kind of a 60-40 tech team leader role. And applied for that, got put on some leadership training with lots of other people and became team leader, and then kind of got a manager role as the business expanded and more people came in, took on a technical manager role. Again, all of my roles were very technical still, so I got involved. It got to probably a point where I would get involved in design, but I really did like organising things, organising people, developing people as well. You know, bringing people on and teaching what I've learned to them, and also encouraging them to learn themselves, that kind of stuff. So I did enjoy that. And then I think I got to a crossroad in about, I think it was about 2012, where there was a head of department role that came up, and I never actually applied for it at first, even though I was probably doing the role. But no one actually approached us about it as well. And then I kind of sat and thought for a bit and thought, well, actually, I'm doing that role. And then I thought, oh God, there's loads of problems to sort out. Do I really want that? Or I want to do, you know, I'm really comfortable being an engineer. And at the time I was doing a lot of kind of design work, really. So less about the hands-on, more doing the design, and my team would do some of the delivery work and kind of finesse started with the design. So it was a big decision, because I had a thought process of, oh, what if I forget how to do that? And that's kind of spent all my career being an engineer. But if you stop, you know, if you don't do it, I always used to think, well, you'll lose it. I don't believe that now. I think, yes, you might not remember how to specifically do something. I don't think you ever lose it. I actually think it gives you a lot more value. So yes, so I had this kind of decision point, and I had our director at the time. I had a meeting with him about it, because he was pretty good at giving advice, and he kind of said to us, I said, I'm at the crossroad, and I need to decide. I feel like, do I have more value to give as, you know, an engineer, or you know, this technical manager, or in management, where, you know, I've worked a lot with people in management who didn't really understand engineering. They might have an MBA and be from a business background, but they didn't really understand, and there was a very big disconnect between the management team and the people on the ground. And I actually thought, I have more to offer. That fact that I come from right at the bottom all the way up and through, you know, and I think that's where I got to in the end. And the advice I got from the director at the time was, make a list of what you're willing to trade and what you're not willing to trade, and then you'll work out what decision to make.
So, and what might you include on a list like that, for example?
So he gave me an example, which was he wouldn't be willing to trade a title, you know, where I'm probably less bothered about a title.
Wow. Okay.
Bothered about a title at one point. I think I did have a discussion where a restructure happened and the titles were all really generic, and I just didn't think it was right. It's not fair when you've got different people with different abilities. But yeah, so he had things like that. I had things like, you know, being involved in technology. I do love technology. So I would always want to have some influence on technology, and, you know, as opposed to just being a manager per se. But then I think, you know, where I got to with that particular role was it was head of department for a very technology team. So sometimes it might be location if you're expected to move for a role. So yeah. Anyway, I did decide to move to what I say is the dark side of management, being an engineer. And I am really pleased that I did, because I do think I had more value to offer as in a leadership role than as an engineer.
Yeah. And at what point do you get the tap on the shoulder to join the board? How does that work?
Well, so I moved into Daisy as a head of department, and Daisy, we kind of ran as a separate entity for a while, because our what was 2E2 managed hosting business went into administration, and that's what the part that Daisy bought. So it was very much stabilize things, you know, really get things settled in. And then we started to do a lot of integration, integrating in the wider business. Daisy's really acquisitive, so there was an acquisition along the line. So I was spent a lot of time involved in due diligence work and integration planning activities, communicating with staff, all that kind of stuff. So quite a lot of your management work really, as well as running the technology teams in the background. So, and there was always a lot of opportunity for roles in Daisy because of a lot of acquisition and growth. So I definitely think, it's moved on quite a lot. I think I went from a head of department role in what was 2E2, managing probably about 20 people, to being, a head of department running probably about 200 people in Daisy, and picking up other technology teams as we go. I was a network background, so I started running network teams, and then like cloud type teams, then UC, and adding as kind of things advanced. Then I do think that probably somewhere in my career of different acquisitions as well, I'm quite strategic, so I have a lot of good ideas about developing new services or technology. So I would create different things and maybe focus on them. And really, the tap on the shoulder for the director role, which was my first director role, which was in 2018, came from a lady who I'd worked with a few times. She was the operations director in another Daisy business, and we worked together on a number of different projects over the years. And we were restructuring the business from being a group to multiple businesses. And she was like, all of the challenges, what needs to be done, you've done all this stuff before, because she'd worked on projects with us, so we kind of knew. And she was like, I want you to be the director of this part of the business. And I remember at the time saying to her, well, I was a head of department, really doing a director's job in the past in that area. Then made me think, someone should have approached us then, and they didn't. And I probably should have said, hold on a minute, I'm doing this level of work and not necessarily being paid for it. Anyway, we had this kind of conversation, and I said, well, I don't think, I could do that with me eyes shut. It's not really a challenge necessarily for us. Yes, I could, put it to where it needs to be. But actually the problem is you've got these two different departments who need to work much closer together. So you should bring them together, and you need one director. And she was like, brilliant, you can do it all. And I was like,
okay.
You can do it all. And I was like, oh my goodness, it's such a big job. And she's like, you'll be fine. Probably having someone notice and recognize what to do, just giving you a bit more confidence, get on with it and get it sorted.
And that's awesome. And where do you kind of go to, because you're still like learning all the time, and say you've got these great ideas and you can be strategic, they've got to be implemented, and got lots of stakeholders to consider. Now, if you needed advice, where would you go to? Who would do you feel like, because I've heard a few people, I know someone that runs a women's leadership group, and she said it can be very lonely at the top and hard to know who to reach out to. Where do you go?
I would say various places. I've got colleagues who I've worked with in the past who I spent a long time in when I talked about Netstar and then what became 2E2, people who I've worked for a really long time with, over 10 years, who I had really good relationships with, who were brilliant also in their field. So, they're colleagues who I used to work with. Most of them are men, because it's a very male orientated environment that, I see, one that we need to change. But it's, so I would confer in ex-colleagues, or I might talk to peers, or I might sound things out with people on the ground to really help us make more informed decisions. Because I think sometimes when you are higher up in the management chain, what you get told, and or what you get presented with. I think it's really important to go still talk to people. I have engineers who are, from a level point of view, they work in a director who works for me, who has a head of department, who has a manager. I'll talk to an engineer and how's it going? How's things? Because I've had a relationship with them at some point, or and I like to think that anyone could come and talk to me, and so that we have quite an open open policy in Daisy where anyone can come, and if anyone's got a good idea, come and tell us, because your manager or your team leader or your director or your C-level team don't know everything.
Yeah. And how do your experiences inform how you set your recruitment or retention or your people strategy?
I think massively. So I am a big advocate of apprenticeships, because I don't think that university or college is for everyone. I equally think I wouldn't then say don't go to university or college, because I think depending on you as a person, what you want to do, what you like doing, there's different paths to get to the same place. You could take those two different paths and end up in the same place. So but I do think that for me, the experience you get hands-on working is really invaluable. And also you really appreciate, as an apprentice, I was an apprentice, I really appreciated the time and effort that the two guys who I work with, the team leader who I work with, spent training me, and I think that I have passed on as I've been a team leader and a manager. Even as an engineer, I always remember working at Grundfos Pumps in Sunderland, and getting called out. Someone had a problem with their PC, and I went over and this is what's wrong, and then I showed them what was wrong, and they were like, oh my, thank you so much, because now I know if that happens again, I know how to fix it. And I'm thinking, I don't have to come and fix it. But prior to that, the person who did their IT before would just come, fix it, and then go.
And just that is there an element for you of that giving and knowledge transfer? Because you said you teach dance as well, so
although it's been a struggle since lockdown to get back into the swing of it, and as I've kind of probably moved up the ranks, it's hard to give some of that time. But so I'm a qualified dance teacher as well, my other professional qualification. Freestyle and rock and roll.
Awesome.
So I do love teaching in general, and probably I've been doing that since I was about 21, 22, really helping out. And I actually love teaching the little kids, which most teachers hate because they get really bored really quick. Trying to teach them how to do a step, and the little ones go, oh, look at my toe. Quick, let's move on to something else. So I do enjoy. I think I am just a bit of an advice giver as well. People might come to me with a problem, so I think sometimes you're that type of person as well.
So you've got that that belief in apprenticeships and the knowledge transfer and being open door policy, being approachable. You mentioned you think maybe it was interesting that you said you thought there were quite a lot of female developers as you were coming through as an engineer. And so I keep hearing about there's not enough balance in the industry. I know lots of women that actually sort of leave as they get to their 30s and 40s. Where do you see changes need to be made, and what are the kind of things that sort of influence your the way that you operate at Daisy?
So I actually think the biggest place that you can make an impact is in the education sector, because it is stereotypes. I think it's 10 million times better than what it was, but it still has a long way to go to really inspire and get people to think I can do that, because still people think, wow, that's a boy's job, I couldn't do that, that's what boys or IT's for geeks. We're not all geeks.
No.
People who work in IT. So I think that that does play a part. So for example, in our organisation, I'd been working for some time with various different HR teams around trying to improve gender diversity, especially in IT. And I also think that people who work for an IT organisation think that means engineers and female engineers, and that's, for me, that if you work in IT, you work in IT, whether you're in finance, project management, you probably know a lot more about IT than what you think you do. So we've launched a STEM ambassador program with STEM learning, really encourage getting people into sharing their tech in general. There's a shortage of skills in the UK and Europe, so the more that we can get people interested in that, and not all just being YouTubers.
Yeah. Did you say it was STEP learning? STEP?
STEM.
Oh, STEM learning.
Yeah. So we launched that program. I am a STEM ambassador myself, so I do activities. I actually do some business activities as part of STEM learning, which they do, which is really good. We did one last year with year 7 school kids, and it was to promote being entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Really trying to encourage kids about being an entrepreneur, and year 7 had to come up with a business idea, and I was a business ambassador helping them make suggestions and being there to answer any questions they had, that kind of stuff. So it's quite exciting doing that kind of work, but then also just talking to kids about technology, and also having females who can talk about it, so they can say, actually, and I think for me, that I never thought there was an issue until 2018, which is a long time really to have spent my career in IT. I'd always known I was nearly always the only girl in a meeting room, but I didn't really see it as a big issue. And I do think a part of that was my upbringing. There was no boys' jobs, girls' jobs. My mum would put the bins out, mow the lawn, and physical things, so that I never really had that kind of, but other people had, and other people would maybe think I can't do that, where I never thought I can't do that because I'm a girl. So I do think that I did this interview for Daisy, which was Women in Engineering, and I did an interview and I got asked some questions, answered some questions, and the video went out, and someone shared it on Facebook. So it went out on normal, LinkedIn, etc. And someone had shared it on Facebook, and a lot of my family and friends were obviously, they tagged us in it. So so many people reached out and said, "Oh, I didn't know that's what you did." And my cousin's daughter said, "Oh, I would never think that I could do that, but like knowing that you do it, like why couldn't I do it?" And I thought, oh, I never actually thought about that. So I really took some time to think about that, and at that point, that's when I decided, well, I need to do a little bit more here. And then I went down a kind of route of, right, let's do some, what do we need to do to improve gender diversity, where I might not have been put off by something, but someone else might. So the language you use in your job descriptions, your adverts, once you notice it, you notice so much. An advert for professional services with 3 men, three white men, stuff like that. And then kind of as I started to come up with what do we need to do, that turned into well, actually it's more than gender, and actually we need to do lots more things. So I would say that experience for me has then shaped what we do in our organisation and how we really try and improve diversity as a whole. I have nephews who are autistic, friends who are Asperger's and autistic, and we have a group at work for autism, and I always say to them, it's a superpower, it's a ability. You think differently, and actually when you look in IT, there's so many people who have probably been undiagnosed because it wasn't necessarily a thing, and I'm not sure if that's a good or bad thing. I think there's pros and cons on both sides of it, but actually it makes them brilliant at what they do. And that's something that we should, in the tech sector, embrace, and give people the ability to really flower in that bit. And
flower, Daisy, yes.
how you if you write a job description and say it must be a team player, because it's just a standard thing that everyone writes, but that might really put someone off who's autistic, because they think, oh, that is not me. But actually, so really looking at all the jobs that you've got and saying, well, what do I really want? Because I could have someone who can do all those things to this level, but I could have someone who can do this part really, really well because they've got this skill. So I do think that my own life experiences do impact how we operate and what we do in our business. I had when I moved into the operations director role, I set all of me department heads a task of, with 1 in every 3 leavers, replace them with an apprentice or a grad.
Great.
Improve your gender diversity by 2%, because it's very hard in IT. But back to the importance is, for me, it's the education. So the work that we do with STEM Learn and working with year 7s and up, because a lot of people tend to want to work with the older kids who are maybe their talent pool for apprentices, but
yeah,
no, they're already informed, they've already made decisions in life, they've already had
yeah.
age 7 is probably your age of influence, so really
Yeah.
work with your young kids.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
That is great, and that's certainly something I see come through certain parts of the legal sector as well. They're going, we need to start way earlier, because you're missing, if they've not been, like you say, if you've not reached them before they choose their options.
Can do both, and you have to do both, don't you, really? We're building some really good relationships with schools that are near some of our head office, for example, in Lancashire and Nelson. We're doing work with schools there where, we work with STEM and we work with schools, and they connect us together, because like quite often schools have a curriculum and they're on this path, and a company might say, well, I want this, and the two don't meet.
Yeah.
What they learn and do is they join you together. By creating that kind of partnership relationship between business and schools and STEM, to really look at educating the younger children and be thinking, I can do this and it's a good job to have. And then also your probably your 14-year-old who could be your next apprentice roles that are coming through, working with them as well.
And I guess as a final question, what do you think has held you in, well, there's two, right? This is the first. What do you think has held you in good stead sort of throughout your career? What's been the thing that's kind of, worked well for you?
I think just doing your job to the best of your ability, really do a good job. I think that's been a big part, and that's why I think I've assumed roles, because if you do a good job, then you'll get recognised for it. I do also recognise that sometimes everyone doesn't see that, so you have to probably put your head up above the parapet a bit and say what you think, which I think is hard when you're younger. I think the confidence that you need for that, and that's where I do think something like a mentor would be brilliant for people to have. I think mentoring wasn't really a thing when I was younger. I would have loved to have had a mentor. I do some mentoring now for the Girls Network. And really looking forward to doing more of that as well. So I think that's probably one. The other is, for me, it's being inquisitive. If you're interested and you want to know, just ask. So I do think that how my career in IT started was, what's that? How does it work? What you're doing? Which is quite common for an engineering mindset. How do you fix it? But being inquisitive and just being interested in something, I think gives you a good. If you're interested, you're going to do well.
and then so horse riding, kickboxing, skiing, dancing, engineering, chief operations officer. What's next? What, project a way ahead. Don't want to say anything that was, set the horses running. But is there something that you think, I don't know, maybe you're going to be a motorbike instructor like your nan, was it?
No, I don't think so. So I have just took a non-exec director role for a company called Groundbreaker. And they are a company who their technology, the board of directors, the technology, it's primarily funded by a company called Acronis, and they build schools all over the world. They plant trees and really try to make a difference in areas of the world that are poor, where girls might not get education because the boys take priority. So I've literally just started this month on that. So brand new to the team, but never really thought about it before, but actually think I would really enjoy it, doing something like that where you get to kind of influence good in the world. So I do think technology for me is still at the heart of what I do, and it's still something that it changes so much. It's never boring. You learn so much all the time, even at this C-level role. Whenever we're launching a new product or we're looking at something new, I ask enough questions to know enough about it to know what it is and how it works. Not at an engineering level, but I still find that that's really interesting, but I think getting involved in doing a bit more good in the world is probably something that I'm looking forward to doing as well.
Yeah. Well, congratulations.
Thank
On your NED role. Wow. Global impact. Love it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Lyndsey. I'll put some connections in the show notes to things like the STEM learning. Yeah. And I guess if people want to reach out and connect with you, they can find you on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Yes, you
Lovely.
can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.